Right. Well, I'm very pleased to have here today Bernard Donoghue. He's the director of the Association of Leading Visitor Attractions at ALVA. So hello to you, Bernard, today. How are you?
Hi, very good. Thank you very much for the invitation. Great to be here.
Good stuff. For those of you who don't know, ALVA basically represents 2,200 of the UK's most important attractions. That's cathedrals, museums, galleries, palaces, zoos, gardens, and so on. Bernard also sits on a number of other committees, and I'm sure he'll mention those in his slides. And I just wanted to say initially, Bernard, before we hear from you, that I think you've been a hugely important and trusted source of information during this last 6 months, and a real comfort and inspiration to people in the sector. So I'd just like to say thanks for that, because it's been fantastic.
Oh, well, that's incredibly kind. I mean, one of the things I'm just about to talk about is one of the great things that's come out of all of this is the collaboration and sharing by different parts of the sector, and also beyond the sector as well. So thanks very much. That's very kind, but utterly indicative of what all of my members have been doing.
Good stuff. And yeah, so as Bernard alluded to there, COVID's been pretty dreadful all around for everyone, but there are, I think, a few silver linings to the cloud. So what Bernard's going to do is run us through some of the things that he considers benefits to have come out of this situation. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much. The first thing I'm going to do is share my screen. So the first thing to say is that although I'm going to be talking about 10 positives to emerge from the pandemic, this is absolutely set in the context of there being at least 35 million cases of COVID-19 around the world since the 31st of December last year, and tragically over 1 million deaths. So I'm incredibly cognizant of the fact that actually we're dealing with something that has been utterly unimaginable on a global scale. My own experience is that I've had crisis management experience in the tourism and visitor economy industry for over 20 years. And one of the things that I have found is that it is possible to learn lessons from crises and to translate them for use in other crises in the future. And undoubtedly, we in the visitor attractions economy will face future crises. And we also have to live with a post-COVID world. So the things that I've done today is just to try and identify 10 things that I've learned from the course of the last 9 or 10 months or so, and hopefully you will have experienced, and we can bring those together as a set of experiences to help inform and better educate us and to plan our businesses. And in doing that, I'm just drawing from a number of particular roles that I have at the moment. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, appointed a group of about 20 of us to be part of his cultural leadership board when he first became mayor 4 years ago. And we've been advising him on, particularly in the course of the last couple of months, the response to COVID in the context of arts, culture, the visitor economy, and particularly freelancers in the creative industry. So I'm going to be drawing a bit from that. I'd share London's Theatre Festival, and we were due to have our Theatre Festival as a biennial this July, and of course we had to cancel that. So what did we learn as well from unpicking a festival as opposed to producing one? Chair the Council of WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, here in the UK. And again, one of the things that we've seen is that intermarriage between the visitor economy, wildlife, biodiversity, habitat and species. And I want to pick up on that in a little as well. And then the last three are the particular organisations with whom I have a trustee responsibility. The Museum and Heritage Awards here in the UK, the People's History Museum in Manchester, which is all about telling the story of people power. All rights, wherever you are around the world, have been won by people, not given freely by governments. And we tell the story of that. And then the last is that I'm a member of the Council of St. Paul's Cathedral. It's a bit like a trustee body, more advisory. And as one of the most important, most visited visitor attractions in London, we've been absolutely hit by COVID-19, and in particular, the downturn of inbound visitors into the UK. Just to set this in context, tourism is one of the UK's most important industries, one of the biggest sectors, the third largest employer, the third largest export industry, because of course inbound tourism to a country is an export industry, in a normal year worth £127 billion and creates 1 in 3 of all new jobs. So it's absolutely the resilient backbone of the UK economy. And of course, since mid-March, that's just fallen off a cliff. We're incredibly dependent here in the UK on inbound visitors. So London, for example, will in a normal year account for about 52% of all inbound visitors to the UK and about 54% of their spending. So those visitor attractions in London that are highly dependent on the inbound visitor, like St Paul's Cathedral or Buckingham Palace, Westminster Abbey or the Tower of London, have been particularly affected this year and will see their recovery lasting much longer. I think, like many countries around the world, tourism was hit first in the UK, hit hardest, and will take the longest time to recover. And that's because we have to put in place all of those physical distancing measures, along with things like personal protection equipment, and the kind of lockdowns that we've seen as a result of second or indeed third waves of the pandemic coming through. So I've drawn from a lot of sources for the 10 things that I think that we could take away and learn from all of this. And it's informed by something that I call the visitor attractions trilemma. It's that age-old trick of managing to balance all of these three objectives. Increasing value, i.e. the amount of money that people spend when they're with you. Increasing volume, the number of people who come, but not ensuring that that's at the expense of the visitor experience. So balancing cash, balancing numbers, but also ensuring that you give a really good visitor experience. And balancing all of those things is where you obtain and achieve wise growth. And I think the real challenge over the course of the last 9 months is that all of these three things have been in askew in a way that we've never really seen before. And we've had to go back to basics, if you like, to try and work out if we had to prioritize one of those three now just to recover and to sustain ourselves and to maintain our businesses, which one would we prioritize and which ones would we not? And it's a real challenge. One of the things that we do at ALVA every year is collect all of our members' visitor numbers for the calendar year previously. So for 2019, we published those in March of this year, 2020. We've been doing that now for about 25 years. And one of the things that I've been doing recently is going back over the course of the last 6 or 7 years or so and trying to work out which visitor attraction grows their visitor numbers successfully and sustainably, but also diversifies their visitor audiences as well. And if there's any kind of common DNA or common behaviors between those that are achieving really good results and really good visitor numbers and great visitor experience reviews. And unsurprisingly, there are. One of the things that I think is really preeminent about over the rise of visitor attractions over the course of the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years or so, and I think will not change in the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years going forward, are these key behaviors. The most successful visitor attractions, which get more visitors successfully and sustainably, do these things. They're provocative, they're disruptive, they take risks, both in terms of the staff team, but also in terms of the trustee boards. They stretch their brands and they develop new audiences. And I'm going to come back to some of these things because I think they've informed some of the behaviors over the course of the last 9 months. Here at ALVA, one of the things that we set ourselves to do right from the outset of the pandemic is be clear about what we wanted to do for not only our members, but the broader visitor economy and visitor attractions economy in the UK. We wanted, in an uncertain, unpredictable, crowded, confused world that Charles has already talked about, to provide clear and regular information to our members, but also the broader visitor economy. We wanted to ensure that staff and visitors were safe, that the organisations and visitor attractions could manage sustainably in the future, and to lobby at the highest levels of government to ensure that they got the package of measures in order to do that. But the other thing was a behavioural thing, really, and it was to provide value-added insights and research at no additional cost to members or indeed any other attractions, and to be as generous as we could in our advice and lobbying. So it wasn't our members who were the principal beneficiaries, but everybody. And I think that's come through too. So we've to date produced 158 daily bulletins during weekdays about what our government is saying, and indeed what some other governments are saying around the world. And those have been received by 1,200 people a day, but actually shared with another 3,000 people here in the UK. We've worked collaboratively with sister organisations to ensure that we have a concerted approach to government, and that's been incredibly helpful. And we've commissioned sector-specific research to understand what the visitor is hoping to do, aspiring to do, is cautious about, is hesitant about, before they come back to visitor attractions. So to better inform attractions as to how they can meet and indeed exceed the expectations of potential visitors. So that visitor sentiment research we've shared broadly and widely, and it's actually still on our ALVA website, and you're very welcome to have a look at it. It's been a really useful tool to ensure that we understand what are the potential tripping points for visitors when they come back. Are they most concerned about cleanliness? Are they most concerned about safety? What are the things that we can mitigate so they can enjoy their experiences safely, carefully, and enjoyably? One of the things that I've really enjoyed during the course of the last 9 months and have really benefited from is collaborating with the World Culture Cities Forum. Now, this is a grouping of over 50 cities from around the world for whom culture is one of their most important products or assets. And they've been meeting together on Zoom calls a bit like this fortnightly to share best practice. And of course, all of them are at different stages of managing or being impacted by the pandemic, from Seoul and Melbourne through to Beijing, through to Cape Town, the capital cities and principal cities of Europe, through to Vancouver and Montreal, Toronto, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Sao Paulo, and beyond. And they've all been able to share their understanding of how they respond to that. So the first thing that I wanted to do before sharing mine was to share theirs about what their top issues are as they recover the cultural and visitor economy assets that they have. Data is absolutely number one. In order to better make case to government for fiscal support or policy support, you really need crucial data and primary research. And those of us in the visitor economy have been reasonably good at that over the course of the last 10, 20 years or so, but we need to be much better. Data is key in order to unlock government funding. Culture needs to be online, as we found, so there is a rush to digital, but I'll talk about my take on that in a second. Strategies for unlocking culture safely are a priority. We've absolutely seen that as we've opened up visitor attractions. Behavioural change is needed to raise public confidence, and particularly in taking public transport to go back to visitor attractions. There's a focus on building the arguments of justifying why culture and the visitor economy and tourism are so important to local, regional, and national economies. The pandemic has highlighted the issues around equity and inclusion even more. I'll come back to that in a second. There is real labour market fragility and policy blind spots that we've suddenly, I think, become awoke to. Cultural tourism is moving from global to local, and local tourism and local markets are becoming the saviour of many visitor attractions. Philanthropy needs to and has started working differently. Trusts and foundations and corporates have been quite quick and flexible and responsive to meet the needs of the cultural sector. Can't really be said the same of individual philanthropists and individual donors. They don't seem to have turned up. And finally, there needs to be reform built into recovery planning. And I'm going to come back to that in a second as well. So my top 10 outcomes or positive things that we've learned during the course of all of this. Certainly here in the UK, one of our government departments is called the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. It's the smallest government department in the UK government, but actually during the course of the pandemic, it's really had a disproportionate level of impact and importance, particularly with the Prime Minister and our Treasury Department. And there's been a real sense that actually the department may be small, but its portfolio is enormous. It's responsible, essentially, for all the things that are fun in life. Drinks, restaurant, hotels, tourism, visitor attractions, culture, theatre, all the kind of things that actually really enhance our life. And I think one of the things that's come out of this is that a greater number of politicians and civil servants and indeed decision makers have fully begun to appreciate the size, value and importance of tourism and of visitor attractions in all of that. Two, and we've just talked about this to a degree, there's been an inspiring explosion of sharing and collaboration within the sector and beyond. Lots of organizations reaching out to each other, sharing trends and insights, perhaps in a way that they wouldn't have done even 9 months ago, but following a realization that we're all in it together and making sure that actually no one is left behind. So I've been on, as you have, countless Zoom calls with sister organizations from around the world, trying to share best practice, understand what learnings we can translate into our own situation, but also share generously the updates and trends and insights and research that we have too. We mustn't let go of this. We mustn't revert back to silo thinking. The third, and if we ever needed reminding of this, is the importance of front of house staff. One of the things that's come across really clearly in all of the visitor sentiment research here in the UK, and I know from sister organisations around the world, is that members of the public were hesitant about coming back, not because they thought that visitor attraction staff would do the wrong thing, behave in the wrong way, or wear the wrong equipment. They had absolute confidence that front of house staff would do all of those things. What they didn't have was the confidence that their fellow members of the public would do those things either. So actually the front of the house staff have been incredibly important, not just welcoming people back, but managing, and in some ways it's a terrible verb, policing behavior to ensure that people actually have a really good day, that people respond to the guidelines, that they respect the rules, but actually they have a really good day out too. So the importance of front house staff for me has never been more important than it has been over the course of the last 9 months and the recovery and reopening of attractions. The fourth, the importance of digital as a tool to complement and to entice and to excite, entertain and invite, but not to replicate or replace the visitor experience. When visitor attractions were physically closed, they were still digitally open. And in those opening few months of, in those early months of lockdown, we saw an explosion of digital activity, from virtual tours of museums and galleries to top 10 tips of things that you could do in the garden, to baking recipe tips and downloadable jigsaws. It was a veritable gift box of things that you could do while the visitor attractions were closed. And it was absolutely phenomenal. And in many ways, in those first few months of the pandemic lockdown, the digital staff were the unsung heroes of visitor attractions. But what it was clear was that people who'd not been to a visitor attraction before used the digital product, the digital opening, if you like, to snack and to check and to look and to investigate places that they probably had never been to before. So that outreach work of the digital product was phenomenally important in enticing, exciting, and inviting people to come back. But what it doesn't do is replace the actual visitor experience, because we want people to cross the threshold and to experience those visitor attractions for themselves. A fifth, and it's a truism and it's probably hard to think about and to say, but we should accept that what we all did in the past wasn't perfect, and we shouldn't try and replicate it when we open. We must recover better. And that's in the way that we treat people, the way that we value people, the way that we tell our stories, but also our appetite for risk and innovation and creativity and doing new things in different ways. And digital actually was a really good example of that. Try new things, and most importantly, be critically honest about who visits your attraction, but also who doesn't and why they don't. We can recover better. This isn't just a question of reopening the doors and starting again as we did in February. There's more to it than that. The 7th is exactly that, and I make no apologies for going over it again. This is an opportunity to open our doors to people who are different from those we closed them to in March. If we simply reopen our doors to exactly the same people that we closed them to in March, we haven't progressed, we haven't learnt, we haven't changed, and we haven't responded to the shifting, provocative and disruptive environments that has been occurring over the course of the last 9 months. We can do better, and we should do better, because the public expect more and better of us, and we must rise to that challenge. The 7th thing is the confluence of Black Lives Matters and COVID. Now, I'm 51, I'm a white, middle-class, middle-aged, well-educated man living in London. I live all of my work in the cultural sector. I like to think that I'm savvy and aware and focused on history and heritage. But actually, it turns out I learnt very little in school or indeed in university about the fact that the cities and towns and villages of the United Kingdom weren't just created on the backs of giants and on the shoulders of heroes, but also on the backs of slaves and of slavery. And I think one of the things that's been fascinating and provocative and disruptive and challenging is that because Black Lives Matters, the phenomena, has happened during COVID, we've been forced into a situation where we've confronted our own history and our ignorance about our history in really quite a stark way. And here in the UK, organisations like the National Trust have been doing sterling work, commissioning research to tell the stories about slavery and slave ownership and plantation ownership, and how the wealth that was derived from that built up the built heritage that so many of us champion and love and adore. So the challenge, I think, for all of us is that the confluence of Black Lives Matters and COVID has given us a better mandate, if we ever needed one, to tell the stories of our people and places and collections authentically and honestly, more than we ever have, because we need to do that because it's the right thing to do. 8, as if we ever needed any reminder of this, we knew from all the visitor sentiment research before visitor attractions opened that people were yearning to come back, coming to an attraction, visiting their favorite places, whether they're parks or gardens, stately homes or museums, galleries, zoos, palaces or cathedrals, are really important to people's lives. And one of the things that I shared with staff before they reopened is that reopening is not only going to be an emotional event for your staff, many of whom have been furloughed or not at work, and they're coming back now in quite an emotional way. It's also going to be an emotional experience for visitors. And we got countless examples of people turning up to their favorite places and bursting into tears or trying to hug a member of staff because they had missed those visitor experiences and those places so much. The least that we can do, therefore, is to reciprocate that love and loyalty. We've seen extraordinarily a significant growth in memberships of visitor attractions like museums and galleries and zoos while those places were under lockdown. So people increasingly joining those organisations, even though they physically couldn't go to them, as an expression of their philanthropy, emotional and financial support to keep them going. And there's also been a huge growth in volunteering once those visitor attractions have reopened. People really want to show with their very presence how much visitor attractions mean to them. We really need to capture that, measure it, and thank people because those are the people who really have maintained and will sustain visitor attractions in the future. 9, a phrase I've been using consistently throughout the pandemic: sanitize your site, but not the visitor experience. People want a safe experience, they want a safe encounter, they want a safe and enjoyable place, but they still want to have fun. They still want an enjoyable experience because that's the point of visitor attractions. So sanitize your site, make it clean, make it safe, not only for you, but also your staff as well. But don't rob it of joy and fun in the pursuit of clinical excellence. People still want to go out and leave their homes and enjoy themselves, and you can provide that. Which brings me to the last point, which is something, again, that I've been saying for a while, but it's become so important and so obvious during the course of lockdown and reopening. You and your colleagues back at your visitor attraction, you create the backdrop for people's happiest memories. Right? What an extraordinary thing to do, but also what an extraordinary responsibility to have too. I suspect that in a post-COVID world, or a world that adapts to the continuing permanence of COVID, and we live with it like a chronic condition, I suspect that there will be an explosion of desire in the course of the next 2 to 3 years of people wanting the experience economy, of people realizing and looking back on 2020 and saying, actually, tangible things, consumer products are not quite as important to me as I thought they were. What's really important to me is experiencing things with my family, with my friends, in beautiful places. Life's too short not to go to all of those places I've been mentally drawing up a list for to go in the future. I think, and it may not feel like it at the moment, visitor attractions and the visitor economy, and the experience economy in particular, are going to be one of the principal beneficiaries of the changing nature of people's behavior over the course of the next 2, 3, 4, 5, who knows, 10 years. So you create the backdrop for people's happiest memories, and that will become more important in the future than it has been in the past. What a huge responsibility. And lastly, leadership. So what does this mean for the leadership of visitor attractions, the visitor economy, tourism, more broadly around the world? Well, we have to listen more acutely, more attentively to our staff, to our visitors, and to those with whom we work. We need to challenge preconceptions and the ways that we used to do things. The past is a different country. 2019 bears no relationship to 2021 in terms of visitor attractions and the visitor economy, because we're a changed entity. We need to be better advocates for who we are, what we do, and what it means to people as well as to economies. And we need to demonstrate our commitment to tourism and to telling those stories better than we have. We need to be authentic in telling the stories of our people, places, and collections, and really live by principles, commitment, and ethos that we might throw out on Twitter, but actually they need to be embedded in our business plans. We need to be better at gathering data and evidence to equip ourselves with the research tools to get money from government, to persuade people to come along, to use our data and trends and insights to better plan as to how we mitigate some of the dramatic impacts, negative impacts on the visitor economy, and to build for a more successful, better recovery. And lastly, it comes back to me, to the individual. Culture and tourism isn't just where you grow jobs, though we're very good at it. It's where you grow people. It's where you grow people in terms of their love of nature, in terms of their connection with their civic community, in terms of their internationalism, in terms of their curiosity about the world. And they do that and remember it best through visitor attractions, by National Trust properties and English heritage castles, by museums and galleries, by understanding about the nature of biodiversity and habitat and species and conservations, by going to zoos and aquaria, by understanding the power of architecture, by going to palaces and cathedrals and abbeys. That's a huge responsibility, but we've shown that we're all desperate, eager, and hungry for the task. So my final point, really is huge congratulations to everybody for getting your visitor attractions up, ready, and open successfully and safely. It's made all of the difference in the world, not only to individual people, but us as an economy as well. And secondly, please take the opportunity, and I know that other speakers today and tomorrow will be talking about this as well, but take the opportunity to go back to your front of house staff and say thank you. They are now, as they always have been, the difference between a good visitor experience and an excellent one. And in the course of the last 9 months, they've been the absolute difference between making people feel safe and welcome and making people feel hesitant and cautious. Sanitize your site, but don't sanitize your visitor experience. Thanks very much for listening to me, and all best wishes.
Thank you very much, Bernard. That was absolutely fascinating. It's some really great points. I've written down here how, and I'm really pleased to see you talking about the front of house staff, because they are at the coalface right now. And as you say, they're not only welcoming people in a positive and embracing kind of way, but also diplomatically making sure that they, you know, wear masks appropriately, etc., and social distance. So that's cool. I've also written down your phrase "recover better," because I think that's a fantastic opportunity for the industry. So Bernard is on our platform. So if any of you have questions, please do feel free to send them over. And it just remains to say thanks very much, Bernard, and we'll speak soon.